Naruto's a very long show with a lot of characters and a lot of plot and a lot of world building. But with those things, you're going to get a little thing called theories. And while actually a lot of the theories that spin out of Naruto are very good, I would know because I've made a large amount of them myself, there's some really bad ones out there. But that makes sense on a pure number basis. If you have a lot of theories, some of them have to be bad. But we're not talking about the just bad ones. No, today we're talking about the worst ones that spun out of Naruto. These are theories that make no sense, nobody wants, or nobody asked for. The kind of theories that just make you go, no, and also, why? Well, before we get to any head scratchers, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And while we're asking why, guys, why don't you go ahead and follow my other two YouTube pages? NCGamer23, where instead of talking anime, I play video games, and Hammer's Collection, where instead of talking anime, I build things from it. Before we get into all that, guys, today we have a brand new sponsor. Today's video is sponsored by Magic Spoon. You're probably wondering, Nick, are we selling utensils? No, guys, Magic Spoon is cereal reinvented. You see, guys, Magic Spoon is a high-protein, keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, wheat-free, naturally flavored, totally delicious, childlike cereal for adults. It says so right here on the box. But Magic Spoon is all about variety. You can build your very own variety box just like this and take choice of all of their most popular flavors of cereal. You can choose cocoa, maple waffle, blueberry, muffin, fruity, you get it? You can even add on their cereal bars, which come in cookies and cream and cocoa peanut butter. And I know a lot of these flavors don't sound like they could be healthy, but they are. Let me reassure you. Magic Spoon cereal has 0 grams of sugar and 13 to 14 grams of protein in every serving, with only 4 to 5 net grams of carbs in every serving. On top of that, their cereal bars, which are usually chock full of sugar, only have 1 gram. They also have 10 grams of protein, only 4 net carbs, and are only 130 calories per bar. So they are keto-friendly, gluten-free, grain-free, and soy-free, and low carb. But I've talked a lot about the health. How do they taste? Bottoms up. Incredibly chewy, still sweet. These are incredible for how healthy they are. You see, growing up, cereal was a big part of my mornings. It was the first breakfast I could make by myself. And as a kid, I loaded up on sugary cereals, which unfortunately I just can't do nowadays. It's too sweet and it makes me feel sluggish. But the incredible taste and high nutritional content of Magic Spoon is legitimately the best possible start to my day. So what are you guys waiting for? Click the link in my description or my pinned comment to get some Magic Spoon today. Use my code NCHammer23 at checkout to get $5 off your first variety box. Magic Spoon is so confident that you'll like their product that they offer a 100% happiness guarantee. If you don't like their cereal for any reason, you can send it back for a full refund. So once again, click the link in my description or my pinned comment below and use NCHammer23 at checkout for $5 off, or go to magicspoon.com/NCHammer23 for that $5 off. Let's start our morning off right. So theories. There's something that every single fan base does. They're a product of not being able to get all of the source material all at one time and shove it into your brain. And with larger shows with more world building, we're gonna theorize about what certain people were doing even when we're not told what they were doing. Theories spin out of open-endedness, and Naruto is made out of open-endedness, which is why I would argue that Naruto has probably more theories about it than most pieces of literature or pop culture out there. That does not mean they're all good. Now, we've talked about theories that didn't come true but should have before, but today we're going to talk about theories that we can't necessarily prove wrong yet but are insane, and also theories we can prove are wrong and are also insane. And we're gonna get started off with a personal favorite of mine, a theory that people still believe in to this day. In fact, it is one of the most popular theories in the Naruto community. Drives me insane because it's idiotic. Stop me if you've heard of this theory before, but have you ever heard the theory that Madara actually won the 4th Great Shinobi World War? Of course you have, because if you're watching this video, that means you consume Naruto content outside of Naruto itself, and every Naruto content creator on Earth has talked about this. But for those of you who haven't heard of this theory, let me break it down for you. Essentially, the goal of Madara during the 4th Great Shinobi World War was to enact infinite Tsukiyomi. Essentially, he wanted to bounce his Sharingan-based genjutsu off the biggest, shiniest, reflective thing that looks down upon the entire Earth, the moon. And by essentially making the moon his own Sharingan, he could cast the entire world into a genjutsu. Tsukiyomi, but infinite. Because we know Tsukiyomi is a genjutsu that's used by Itachi that seems to be able to stretch the passage of time. To the person placed in genjutsu, it feels like 72 hours, but to the rest of the world, it's only about a second. Madara wanted to use Tsukiyomi the genjutsu, but stretch it out for the entirety of time, and thus place the entire world in an infinite Tsukiyomi. And Madara actually enacts his infinite Tsukiyomi. However, there's technically ways to dodge the Tsukiyomi. The way that Team 7 does it is by using a Susanoo. A perfect Susanoo, or maybe even just any kind of Susanoo, can reflect the genjutsu of the Infinite Tsukiyomi. At least that's what they want you to think what happened. See, this theory states that Infinite Tsukiyomi was actually successful on Team 7, and that the second that Madara cast Infinite Tsukiyomi, two timelines diverged. Essentially, the way that Infinite Tsukiyomi works is that it creates a reality for each and every single person. And the reality that it creates for you is your perfect reality. There's no war, everybody loves each other, and it's everything you ever want. It's essentially personal heaven. So us as audience who are following Naruto through the storyline would then get transferred into Naruto's Infinite Tsukiyomi dream. And Naruto's Infinite Tsukiyomi dream is everything after Madara enacts Infinite Tsukiyomi. So he envisions them stopping the Infinite Tsukiyomi with Susanoo, because that's exactly what Naruto would want. He would never want to be caught in the Infinite Tsukiyomi. And then Madara dies. But of course, this is what Naruto would want. He would want the war to come to a close, right? Yes, Naruto, the person who's never killed anybody. I mean, he's killed one guy accidentally. But yes, that guy, that main character we're talking about, wanted a grisly and brutal end for Madara. And then in his Infinite Tsukiyomi dream, the Otsutsukis were introduced, an intergalactic threat of essentially Super Saiyans who want to wipe out planets for their chakra sources. And the one that they fight in Seal, and they don't have to kill her, is actually just a part of a greater race of even stronger superpowered aliens. Okay, but they won the war and they even met the Sage of Six Paths, right? And Naruto got a power up and Sasuke got a Rinne Sharingan, and then Sasuke tried to kill Naruto again, and then he took all the tailed beasts to fight Naruto, and then they blew each other's arms off. But Sasuke came back to the village, right? With one less arm and no will to fix that arm. So thus far in Naruto's Infinite Tsukiyomi dream, we have Madara dead, a new race of hyper-intelligent, hyper-dangerous aliens introduced, and Sasuke's lost an arm.
But Nick, you're oversimplifying things. The Fourth Great Shinobi World War comes to a close, Naruto's reunited with Kurama, and Sasuke comes home.
Cool. What about Boruto in its entirety? You know what? No, I'm jumping ahead. Let's talk about the rest of Naruto. Naruto marries Hinata, and he becomes the Hokage. But before that, he did have to travel to the moon because Hinata was kidnapped by another one of those super dangerous, super intelligent aliens. Because mind you, Naruto the Last is canon to the timeline and also happens before Naruto was even married to Hinata or became the Hokage. So Toneri Otsutsuki belongs to a clan of Otsutsukis that lived on the moon and then all killed each other, and now Toneri's trying to throw the moon into the earth, which not only implies that there's Otsutsukis out in the universe, but there's Otsutsukis quite literally in their orbit already. But surely Naruto would have a dream about how the Hidden Cloud was developing essentially planet buster weapons without anybody knowing after signing a treaty of peace, and that the moon would get cut in half by Toneri only for Hinata and Naruto to have to fix it. But Naruto and Hinata kiss. Good job. Could have just had a dream about, you know, you and her getting ramen or something instead of her getting sent to low orbit. I understand the moon's not in low orbit, okay? Okay, so now Naruto gets to marry Hinata and become the Hokage, right? Well, yeah, and then he gets walked down the aisle by Iruka, and it's super nice and cute, and Sai and Ino are married now, and Sakura and Sasuke are married now, and everybody from the Konoha 13 seems really happy. And then Naruto becomes Hokage and has to go to his cloaking ceremony, and his daughter knocks him out colds, and he has to have a stand-in for his own Hokage ceremony. But that's only the beginning of Boruto, because, you know, in Boruto, two more Otsutsukis attack and then basically suck half of Kurama outside of Naruto. And then they find out that Otsutsukis are sent down in pairs and that there's an additional Otsutsuki who was supposed to be with Kaguya. And then Naruto has to activate this new cool mode called Baryon mode that ends up killing one of his best friends on Earth. You know, the demon fox that he finally made friends with a couple of years ago. But at least he saved the day and everybody was totally fine, right? I mean, except for Kurama, until Sasuke got stabbed in the eyeball and lost that upgrade that he got from Hagoromo. Oh, and his son, 80% Otsutsuki, and now has to take medicine to not become a full Otsutsuki, and the rest of the Kages want his son murdered. Still got a cute daughter, though. Listen, even if you don't count the events of Boruto as canon towards the Naruto timeline and just look at canonicity within Naruto, this theory never made any sense. The argument comes up a lot that Naruto would want conflict in his perfect life. That Naruto as a warrior wouldn't want a completely peaceful, boring life. And you could say that these statements are even further corroborated by the fact that as the Hokage, he should just be pushing paper, but he actually gets involved in most of the village's fights. Okay, fair. Naruto probably would want some action, some skirmishes. He's a ninja after all. But I seriously doubt that those fights would culminate with Sasuke and Naruto losing their arms, the tailed beast now rejecting humans en masse. I mean, some of the tail beasts are still homies with the humans, like Son Goku and Isobu. Naruto certainly wouldn't dream of Madara's death because he never wants anybody to die. And why? on God's green earth would Naruto dream up an alien race that is going to threaten Earth at a high level for the rest of time? But since we're talking about creepy people with pasty white skin, let's talk about our second bad theory, and this one's about Orochimaru. You see, I understand there's a lot of questions around Orochimaru and Boruto, and it's because we don't basically know what he's up to. Orochimaru was the orchestrator of the Konoha Crush, killed the third Hokage, and has killed hundreds of children in immoral scientific experiments. Brought back Wood release though. But now he is allowed to do research for Konoha as long as he's being watched by high-level jonin like Yamato. Kind of funny how that all came back to him actually. But why is he allowed to do research? Why was he forgiven, and what is he scheming now? All three of these are really good questions, and we'll address the first two in a separate video, but for the moment, let's just talk about what is he scheming. The logical person would answer that question with the information that we have. He's studying cloning techniques. He's already cloned himself in Log and Mitsuki, and he's cloning himself to perfect his research of the Snake Sage mode, because Orochimaru's entire life goal is to understand every single jutsu, dojutsu, genjutsu, taijutsu, kenjutsu, kinjutsu on Earth. And one that he wasn't able to figure out on himself is Snake Sage mode. You see, Orochimaru was bitten by the Great White Snake Sage, and he did survive the influx of nature chakra, so he was allowed to train in Snake Sage mode with the Great White Snake Sage. However, his body wasn't physically strong enough to take the Snake Sage mode transformation. This is why Mitsuki struggles with it, and when he uses Snake Sage mode, his organs fail because Mitsuki is a clone of Orochimaru. But that's what the logical person would say. What would the illogical person say about what Orochimaru is doing in Konoha right now? Well, he's plotting to steal Sarada or Mitsuki's body, of course. Come on, that's not what you jumped to immediately. What are you doing? Let's start with Sarada because honestly, that's where the track record points, and that's what most people talk about. Essentially, people say Orochimaru is biding his time in Konoha until Sarada becomes old enough for him to make her a host. And if you look at this at an incredibly simplified and base level, this makes sense. I mean, Orochimaru tried to take both Itachi and Sasuke's bodies, and unfortunately he was unsuccessful both times, because when Orochimaru initiated his living corpse reincarnation jutsu on both Itachi and Sasuke, they used the genjutsu of the Sharingan to essentially flip it onto him. So we know that Orochimaru is interested in the Sharingan and the Uchiha, and we know Itachi's dead. There's no way he's trying it on Sasuke, and that only leaves us one person, Sarada. But let's unpack Orochimaru's motivations for wanting either Itachi or Sasuke as a host. You see, Orochimaru is able to use living corpse reincarnation every 3 years, and this is perfect because it takes about 3 years for his host body to start rejecting him. Essentially, if the host is not very strong, the body will begin to break down, or if the host is taken without their consent, the soul, the heart, and the mind will begin to fight back against Orochimaru after 3 years. Regardless, after about 3 years, Orochimaru needs a new body. So for years, Orochimaru has been looking for a perfect host, which is what he thought he had in Kimimaro and Sasuke and Itachi, I guess. A perfect host would allow him to have a host body for more than 3 years. Ideally, it would allow him to have a host body for as long as that host would stay alive. And since Orochimaru takes on the ability of the host, like a Sharingan or Shinkatsu Myaku in Kimimara's case, an additional Kekkei Genkai would also be incredible with the perfect host. So clearly, because Orochimaru has both tried with the Sasuke and Itachi to take them over, he would identify Sarada as a perfect host, right? Well, it's definitely a possibility if you ignore just so many things. One, it has been roughly 17 years since the end of the Fourth Great Shinobi World War. Orochimaru is not allowed to switch hosts. Do you think that Naruto and Yamato are just letting Orochimaru glom on to new people? No, he is very closely watched by Konoha. He's allowed to clone people, yes. That's because for some reason Naruto has no ethical problem with that, but he's aware of Orochimaru's cloning. So if Naruto and Konoha have a close eye on Orochimaru and he can't switch hosts, what does that lead us to believe? He's been doing secret switches? Maybe, that's a possibility. Or we think about the unusual circumstance that led Orochimaru to his last switch that we know of. You see, when Orochimaru threw on the Reaper Death Seal mask and summoned the Shinigami in the Fourth Great Shinobi World War, he took his sword of Kusanagi and split his own stomach open, essentially fatally wounding both Orochimaru and the host body. And it's at this point that Orochimaru switched to something very important, a white Zetsu. For those of you who don't remember what white Zetsu are, they are just Hashirama cells. They are full Hashirama cell bodies, which means regeneration, massive nature chakra reserves, and would release. On top of all that, technically, they may not even age. Doesn't that sound like something Orochimaru might want to hold on to? Not to mention, he's been in that white Setsu body for 17 years, which I don't know how good you are at arithmetic, is a bit longer than 3.
But Nick, he still wants to figure out the Sharingan.
He's done it. Orochimaru made a Mangekyo Sharingan for Shin, and then he made a bunch of 3 Tomei Sharingan for all the little Shins. I'm sorry, but without a damn near perfect understanding of the Sharingan, how would Orochimaru make a Mangekyo Sharingan? And if he wanted a Sharingan wielding host, why wouldn't he take Shin Uchiha?
He's not a real Uchiha.
Yeah, that's fair, but do you think Orochimaru cares about bloodlines? He wants longevity in Kekkei Genkai. He's done with the Sharingan. He figured it out a long time ago. But since we're talking about a long time ago, let's get back to Naruto. This next theory is almost as mind-numbingly stupid as our first one. So we all understand that the way that Naruto was brought up in Konoha is borderline unacceptable. Hiruzen was specifically trusted with raising Naruto, and he just threw him in an apartment in the slums, gave him some milk and some ramen, and said, raise yourself. I stand on the take that Hiruzen had a lot more on his plate than raising Naruto, because he was the Hokage for both the Second and Third Great Shinobi World Wars and a bunch of other things, but he could have sent like at least one Jonin to keep an eye on Naruto. Regardless of how you feel about how Naruto was raised by Konoha and Hiruzen, some people believe that this was done intentionally. Some people look at Naruto's upbringing and look at where it brought him and decide that it had to be intentional because where it brought him was so important and incredible. People assumed that Hiruzen was this mastermind who decided that by raising Naruto shittily, he would raise a perfect child. Essentially, the theory states that Hiruzen and the rest of Konoha were purposely as terrible to Naruto as they could be to make him Hokage material, which is a take. It's certainly a bold play considering the fact that he had the 9-tailed fox in him, which has already destroyed Konoha once. But to get further into the meat of this theory, essentially the entire village, and Hiruzen specifically, had to decide that they were going to be so mean to Naruto that he was gonna lead them, which is exactly how every single president up to now has been made. I'm sorry, I mixed up president and school shooter. Why on God's green earth would Hiruzen look at the child with the fox demon inside of him and say, we should all be mean to him to make him a better person? Naruto is quite literally, within the Naruto-verse, a walking nuke. Within him is contained the strongest tailed beast by far. A tailed beast so strong that the only people ever able to control it were Madara and Minato, and it's already destroyed Konoha once. And there's already a track record of understanding that Kurama can be used for very bad things. Madara put a Susanoo on it and fought the first Hokage. So if we as a village understand that the fox demon inside this little boy could be used to destroy this entire village, once again, why would you try to make an enemy with the fox boy? You could say,
Nick, they weren't trying to make an enemy out of him. They were trying to polish him into a Hokage diamond.
Have you ever been bullied or just seen somebody been bullied in either real life or in media? How often does that person outside of Naruto get up, they lift their head out of the toilet, and just look at all these bullies and they go,
I'm gonna save all of your lives one day, and then I'm gonna become the class president, and you guys are gonna love me?
Never, not even once. It makes even less sense when you think about the fact that there was another Jinchuriki in the village over going through a very similar circumstance, and he was killing random people. Gaara is the blueprint on how not to raise your Jinchuriki. It's How to Train Your Dragon's 3rd movie. By imparting massive amounts of stress on a child with a demon inside of them, you raise a murderer. Only problem is, Konoha, that your child's demon has a demon inside of him tens of times stronger than the child demon in the village over. Oh, and by the way, the child demon in the village over still has his dad. This theory makes even less sense when you actually have a fair amount of Naruto lore under your belt. If you've read the light novels and some of the data books, you'll know that the reason that Naruto is treated so shittily in Konoha is actually Danzo's fault. Danzo, after the Nine Tails destroyed a large part of the village, actually leaked out that Naruto had Kurama sealed inside of him to centralize all of Konoha's hate onto Naruto. Danzo figured that all of Konoha needed something to hate and blame for the destruction to redirect their anger at a singular source. And you can make the argument that Danzo was under the control of Hiruzen to leak this information out. If you know absolutely nothing about Danzo and Hiruzen's relationship, Danzo does not go to Hiruzen for permission. It's like his whole thing. Also, this isn't what Hiruzen would have wanted. He was actually a really good guy. Danzo literally orchestrated and greenlit the Uchiha massacre without a word from Hiruzen. But since we're talking about the Uchihas, let's talk about our fourth theory. Shisui Uchiha is still alive. Making this video is making me upset. Shisui Uchiha, for those of you who may not remember, was Itachi's best friend from childhood. He, like Itachi, was in the root and spied on the Uchiha for Danzo. He also had the Mangekyo Sharingan in both of his eyes, and both of those eyes had the ability called Kodo Amatsukame. Shisui was an incredibly powerful ninja, probably about as powerful as Itachi, except he didn't have a chakra sickness, so he actually probably had a higher ceiling than Itachi. And because Shisui is such a cool and underexplained character that was also very powerful, people have a hard time believing that he's dead. And there's a couple of reasons why. Essentially, Shisui's corpse is never found. And that's suspicious if you ignore almost everything about Naruto in its entirety, because you'll know if they found Shisui's corpse, they would be able to do something with it. And what is that something? Pause the video, tell me in the comments. Did you guess Edo Tensei? In Naruto, you have to make corpses disappear forever unless you want them coming back later. And guess who Kishimoto didn't want coming back to Naruto later on? Shisui. Why, you ask? Probably the reason he killed him off in the first place, the Kodo Amatsukame. If Shisui was brought back, specifically with Edo Tensei, he would have both of his MS. Doesn't matter that he handed them out at the end of his life. Itachi came back with both of his eyes, and Sasuke is wearing them in his face. On top of that, Edo Tensei people regenerate instantly, which implies that there's a large chance that Shisui would be able to recover in much faster than 10 years from the uses of Kodo Matsukame. But even if it would take 10 years for Shisui to reuse Kodo Matsukame in either his left or right eye, the fact that he could use it twice if he was brought back during the war arc would have changed everything. He literally could just use it on Kabuto and Madara and thanks for coming out. They had to disappear his body. Why do you think they conveniently never found Jiraiya's body until Boruto? It was because they didn't want to bring him back. Kishimoto literally said this. The second point is the fact that Shin Uchiha has Shisui's chakra in his arm. Well, at least that's what people who believe in this theory want you to think. Essentially, this point comes from when Ao, you know, the guy from the Hidden Mist who got a Byakugan from a Hyuga during the Third Great Shinobi World War, the right hand of the Mizukage. When he sees Danzo's right arm, he sees Shisui Uchiha's chakra. And that arm came from Shin Uchiha. So people make the connection that Shin Uchiha must have Shisui's chakra, which is ignoring a lot of very important parts, like the fact that Danzo has the Kodo Amatsukame in his face, and that obviously having the Kodo Amatsukame, Shisui's eye, inside of your body would impart to you a small amount of Shisui's chakra. As to why Shisui's chakra was in his arm, I can only assume because his arm was filled with constantly activated Sharingans. And Shisui being an Uchiha's chakra would probably go to the Sharingans. This makes sense because the other place that Ao saw Shisui's chakra was Danzo's face. So what do we think is more likely? Shisui's chakra just bled from Danzo's eyeball to his arm, or that Shin Uchiha somehow is either Shisui or met Shisui, got some of his chakra in his arm, and then gave that arm to Danzo. On top of that, they quite literally wrote a light novel about Shisui's death. People were so up in arms about Shisui dying and had so many theories about how he's not dead, they literally wrote the Itachi light novels and explained Shisui's death. Shisui is not only poisoned by Yoji Aburame, with so much poison that it will kill him indefinitely, he tells Itachi to murder him after pulling out his only remaining eye and shoving it in a crow. And then Itachi murders him and pushes him down into the waterfall, and that's what activates his MS. All of this canon. So not only was Shisui poisoned and then killed by Itachi, he was pushed into a waterfall. Blind. I'm sorry. He's gone. And the last theory isn't necessarily stupid, I just don't like it. For this last theory, we're jumping back to Boruto. And once again, we're talking about Sarada, but not with Orochimaru in the conversation. You see, there's a theory amongst a sect of Boruto fans out there that Sarada is going to follow the steps of her father. And by following the steps of her father, I don't mean by being a poorly written edgelord. No, they think that Sarada is going to become an antagonist, which is the possibility, once again, if you ignore so many things things. I mean, Sarada does look up to her father, but not as much as she looks up to somebody else. Naruto, the literal golden child in the Hokage of the Leaf. Sarada wants more than anything to be Hokage, and she most likely will be. On top of that, she's also the first ever Uchiha to awake the Sharingan through love. Every other Uchiha in the history of Uchiha has awoken their Sharingan using hatred. Sarada awoke hers by seeing her father. 3, she's very even-headed and the moral compass of Team 7. You could argue that she's seeing the rest of Team 7 get stronger without her, with Boruto getting the Kama marking and Mitsuki having Snake Sage mode. But even if she was to go to Orochimaru for a curse mark, that wouldn't be her defecting from the village right now, because he's right down the road. Sarada is supposed to represent a new generation of Uchiha who want to help the village. She is the physical representation of the cycle of hate closing. If Sarada were to become an antagonist, the cycle of hate would continue, but that was ended when the Indra and Ashura reincarnations came back together in Naruto and Sasuke. So thematically, having Sarada become an antagonist would go against everything Naruto wrote. It wouldn't make any sense, but it could happen. What do I know? I'm just a guy yelling into the void. But if you like my screaming, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Listen, I'm not saying that I wish Boruto was a bad dream too, but sometimes you gotta
wake up to reality.